refused to do it. And so one day he got so upset that he decided he was going to go to the king and have the king make an edict that there was going to be a day a year later that they were going to kill all of the Jews. Mordecai finds out about it, and of course he is troubled. So he puts on sackcloth, this scratchy material, and ashes, and he makes himself dirty, and he is in mourning outside of the gate that enters into the king's palace, because it was illegal for anyone who was doing that to go in. There was this routine that he had, that every day he would come down and he would put his eyes on Esther, because he wanted to call and check in on her and see how things were going. Word gets to Esther that Mordecai is out there in sackcloth and ashes, and he's mourning. She sends word to find out what exactly is going on. Mordecai tells her what is happening and how troubling everything is, and we have to put a plan in place to change the situation. Otherwise, all of the Jews will be killed. The word comes back to her, and this is where we pick up the text. She says, well, no one can go before the king, and he hasn't called for me in 30 days. He hasn't wanted me physically, and he hasn't wanted me around him in any capacity for the last 30 days. She says, so in essence, there's really not much I can do. So she sends that back to Mordecai. Mordecai has to give her a reality check. How many of you know that there needs to be somebody in your life that can check you from time to time to let you know, wait a minute, I think you're missing a few key points. And so he sends back the answer, says, do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. God always has somebody somewhere that will accomplish the task. Just because it's not you, I need you to understand that God is faithful and has somebody somewhere that will do what he needs to have done. But I need to put you in remembrance of the fact that you and your father's family will be killed. Haman is not so understanding, and he knows that you are a Jew and you will be killed as well. But it's this part that he says that really stuck with me. It says, and who knows that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. And so I want to talk to you this morning from this topic alone. This is your season. This is your season. In case you didn't know, I want to let you in on a little secret. Life has a way of having you regularly stop and evaluate your progress to kind of determine where you are. It's human nature to look around you and see how the people, your peers, your comrades, how they are doing, and then you establish how well you're doing based on how they're doing. But I need for you to know that it's really an apples to oranges comparison. It's not equal, it's not even. You're not looking at the same thing, trying to get a good determination in terms of where you truly stand if you're making that comparison. But when you do, I need you to understand that you set yourself up for frustration and disappointment. We often forget that we've not been called to keep up with the Joneses. And oftentimes we spend time trying to determine how well we're doing based on how well they're doing. Well, they got a new car, then I need to get a new car. And they've got upgrades to their home. And so now I need to get upgrades. They go to the nail salon and they get the dip. And so now I need to go to the nail salon and I got to get the dip. And so we begin to do these things to try to keep up and to keep pace with everybody. But ultimately, it's not a fair comparison, because the Bible declares, what fellowship hath light with darkness? And it tells us to come out from among them and be ye separate. Our standards, our rules should not be the same. The litmus test that we have should not be the same as that of people of the world. It must be different because we're different. We've been called to come out from among them. We are in a strange land. We are sojourners just passing through. We are a royal priesthood, a peculiar people who have been called out to show forth his praises. But I submit to you that oftentimes we forget that and we get caught up in the rat race. We forget that not been called to keep up with the Joneses, but we've been called to allow God to direct our path. Jasmine had asked me a question this weekend. She said, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, what does it say? And it's one that we often quote. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, lean not to thine own understanding, but in all your ways, if you acknowledge him, he shall direct your paths. And so if we trust in God and allow him to be God in our life, then he shows us where it is that we should go. But any path that we walk that isn't God-led or directed has a tendency to position you out of place for a crucial time or season in your life. I want you just in the back of your mind to keep remember this is your season, and we're talking about Esther. The battle to compete against the Joneses goes against and forgets that we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against spiritual wickedness in high places. The world system doesn't really want you to recognize that there is a demonic presence that you're battling against. They want you to get caught up in battling or fighting or being at odds with your brother and sister, being at odds with the people that are a part of humanity. Because if I can get you focused on the wrong thing, then you're not focused on the right thing. And so what he does is he tries to make us into distracted disciples. And there is nothing worse than a disciple who remains distracted because they're not focused on the things that matter. And if your attention is elsewhere, then it's not on the things that it should be on. If you're, let's use this, navigation. If you are not paying attention to what you're doing, and everybody has done it, if you drive a car, the navigation tells you that in so much time you have to get off on the exit. But have you ever been driving and listening to a song or listening to a podcast or doing whatever, and you're not focused and somehow you miss your turn? All of a sudden you realize now I have to adjust. Now this is where we begin doing this thing. We begin to beat up on ourselves. Why was I not paying attention? Now I've just made things harder than it has to be because I was not paying attention. That is what the enemy wants to do, to get us distracted and not be focused on the things that matter. And so it's incumbent upon us to constantly and consistently to ensure that we have the same mind. Let that mind which is in Christ Jesus be also in us, a mind that is focused on the things that matter, and to not allow ourselves to get distracted. Now, in our humanity, let's just be real, sometimes it's going to happen. But you need to minimize that as much as possible and try to stay focused, because the media and everything really wants to keep you unfocused on the things that matter. One of the things that I find most interesting, and I'm not certainly going to go in a political manner, but oftentimes when I go into places and I'm dealing with people, people will say things and I'll go, you're really missing the point. And so I went into the room of a patient the other day. I was rounding, just went in to speak, and her and her family members were in there, and they began to talk about how Dr. Fauci is going to get rich off of the COVID virus and blah, blah, blah. Of course, they were watching Fox News. I really didn't buy into it. I just kind of listened to what they had to say and then just went on about my business. But what I realized is people are distracted. They're making Dr. Fauci the issue when the issue really is, can we get everybody vaccinated so that we can get back to normal life? But if you're distracted by what this person says, and you're really not focused on the right thing. It is amazing to me that people want to believe the lie, but don't want to stay focused on the truth. And so we can find ourselves, even in Christendom, I know you don't think that's really possible, But we can find ourselves getting distracted by what people are doing in the church and miss the message of the faith of the church. I hear people always talking about, well, I don't go to church because hypocrites are in the church. The same person's in the church is the same person that was in the club. Well, you go to the grocery store every day or every other day or once a week. Well, it's hypocrites in the grocery store. Has that stopped you from going to the grocery store? You go to get coffee at Starbucks. Has that stopped you from going there? You go into the restaurants. And there's this stigma associated with the church that the church is supposed to be this perfect place with perfect people. And the reality is, the church is a place with broken people that are smart enough to recognize that they need to come to a place where they can be fixed. And so I don't knock anybody that's doing something wrong the night before because they realize that they need to come to the church to get fixed. However, at some point, you must stop getting distracted and then focus in on the main thing. You know, our saying, keep the main thing the main thing. But we often get distracted and we don't realize that we don't wrestle against people, but against spirits. When we lose sight of this perspective, then we're operating without a sense of direction and we're living according to the world's standard. Now, anytime that you live according to the world's standard, you are setting yourself up for failure, because this world pushes the concept that position is everything. It judges you based on your job, your car, your education, your home, what you wear, the places you go to eat. You know, I don't go there, man. You know, I eat better than that. I don't. You know, folk tell you if you old school and you decide that you like pig feet, well, I don't eat that. And so what I used to do, and a moment of transparency, I don't like chitlins. I'm gonna tell you real quick, don't like them, won't eat them. And for a long time, everybody that ate them was the devil. You was like your, your father, the devil. But I had to come to a point where I realized that just because I don't like them doesn't mean that I can vilify others who like them, because there are things that I like that other people don't like. And so I had to come out of a place of being judgmental over people who like things that I don't like. The last thing that we want to do, and I know that the scripture, people in the world, they'll say, "Judge not, lest ye also be judged." No, that's out of that. Folks say that because they don't want to be judged. That means the same measure you judge me with, I can judge you with. And so we have to ensure that we find ourselves not being holier than thou, or trying to make it seem as if we've got it all together. And so this society, in videos, and we look at celebrities, they push a culture that speaks to a lavish lifestyle of those who have made it. If you do this, then you've made it, you are there. But David says something in Psalm 84:10, one of my favorite scriptures. David says, "It is better to be a doorkeeper in the house of the Lord than to dwell in the tents of the wicked." In other words, David said, the only thing that truly matters is to be found in service to God and in right relationship with God. I'm willing to do something humble for God than to be living a lavish lifestyle for the world. Commission in their song, they said, "Only what you do for Christ will last." So our focus can never and should never be on what the world sees as success. But we have to determine what is success. It's what God says success is. And so that's why David's focus was on being a doorkeeper in the house of the Lord was more important than to have the riches or the wealth of the world. I have 2 points that I want to address today. Just 2. The first point, what you don't understand, you don't appreciate. What you don't understand, you don't appreciate. Ecclesiastes 3:1, a very familiar passage of scripture. Um, as I start saying it, you will immediately know what it is. Ecclesiastes 3:1. We're just going to deal with 3:1. It says, to everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under the heaven. And then it goes on to tell you a time for this, a time for that, a time for this, a time for that. And it just throughout the whole text. In each season, there is something to be accomplished for a specific purpose. In each season, there is something to be accomplished for a specific purpose. In other words, there is a reason that you are where you are in this season of life. You're not where you are simply because you messed up, you made some bad decisions, you made some bad choices. If you are a believer, because was it Romans 8:28 tells us, for we know that all things work together for good to them that love God and are the called according to his purpose. So even if you have messed up and made some bad decisions and made some bad choices, and you find yourself where you are in a position that God can use you. You are in a position where God can be glorified in your life. But what I want to warn you against is becoming distracted. You can become distracted by looking at where you are in life and begin to beat yourself up over the decisions and the choices that you have made that have gotten you where you are. Need you to understand that regardless of where you are divinely positioned for God to be able to use you. But you cannot be used if you are so distracted by where you are that you lose sight of whose you are. Because God can use you in whatever situation or circumstance or place that you are currently positioned. That's why it's vital that you recognize that wherever you are, you can be used by God. There's a reason that you are where you are in this season of life. In Mark, the 2nd chapter and the 27th verse, Jesus is teaching. And Jesus, he's in the synagogue in the temple and he's teaching, he's educating. If when we look back at the scriptures now, we're looking at it from a historical perspective. But you have to realize that in that day, Jesus was radical. Jesus was literally like a Black Panther. He was somebody who came in and tore down what everybody thought was right. And he began to go against what the religious teachers were saying. That's why they wanted to kill him, because he was so radical. They had never seen anybody come in and teach with such fervor. And he was so theologically sound. Why? Because he was the word, and they couldn't debate that. So they had to try to find other ways to get him. But Jesus was a radical. And here's another example of it. So he's teaching, and then Jesus decides he's hungry. And so nobody could eat the consecrated bread except for the priest. Jesus goes in and gets the bread and starts eating it. And everybody is blown away. Who does he think he is coming in here and is going to eat this consecrated? I tell you, he was radical. When you read the scriptures, you understand Jesus did not care. He was about his father's business, and whoever he had to shake up or get them to twist the way that they thought, he would do it. And so he eats the bread in the temple, and then he says to them, the Sabbath was made for the man, not man for the Sabbath. Jesus said, listen, you got this thing twisted. Because, on the Sabbath, they were supposed to only eat or drink or do certain things. And Jesus said, listen, Sabbath was made for the man to worship. Man was made before the Sabbath. And so God made the Sabbath so that man would have an opportunity to worship. If you make Sabbath the main thing, then you're distracted and you're not focused on the important thing. And the important thing was worship, not the Sabbath. It's important that we realize that the seasons, in the same way, were made for man and not man for the seasons. If we miss this, then we live for the days and not in the days. You've got to learn to appreciate where you are in life. Stop beating yourself up about where you are. The question is, now that you are there, what are you going to do? Seasons shift and change. They don't stay the same. Amen. I think everybody can bear witness to that. Right now, we are dealing with transitioning from winter into a summer season, and we are in that season in between winter and summer, which is known as spring. Seasons are never meant to be eternal in nature. Seasons exist in time. And what happens is we begin to look at things from the perspective, we lose sight of eternity and begin to put too much attention on time. Remember, I said a little while ago, the commission had a song that only what you do for Christ will last. We are building up eternal. I heard John Key in one of his songs. He said, I'm trading my tomorrows for someday. Everything that we're doing it because we're looking towards eternity. But you can't be so focused on eternity that you don't take advantage of existing in time. You've got to learn to appreciate living this life. And so that's why you've got to recognize and appreciate the season of life that you're in. People that look back at life with regret are often the same people that didn't stop to smell the roses. They are people that didn't appreciate being, I appreciate when it's raining outside and being outside in the rain. You want to know why? Because there is something awesome about the smell after it has rained. There is something about that is amazing to me about water falling from the sky. Yeah, I get why it happens, but it doesn't always have to be sunny for me to appreciate life. Sometimes it's windy and I can understand and appreciate the awesomeness of the wind. I'm like Paul, I've learned that whatever circumstance I find myself in, therewith to be content, because God has allowed and afforded me the opportunity to be appreciative of it. Even though it does, I've got to appreciate the fact that I'm in the world and I'm cognizant of the fact that the pollen is out there and it's wearing me out. But it's amazing because the pollen is necessary in order for the flowers to germinate and do what they need to do. And so I can't just get distracted by the fact that the pollen is whipping up on me, that I forget to appreciate the trees and the beauty of the flowers and the smell after it's rained and the sun on my face, all of those things. You've got to stop and learn to appreciate time that God has given us. And so I said that you can't appreciate what you don't understand. And so that's why David in Psalms 8:3 says, when I consider, when I think about, when I ponder, when I stop and look around the heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars, which thou hast ordained. David said, I've got to stop being so busy and appreciate where I am and appreciate what I have and look back over my life when I've missed the opportunities to be thankful and appreciative of what God has done for me and what God has been doing in my life. David stopped to consider and think about where he was and lived in the moment. And if there's any one thing that I think that we don't do is live in the moment. We complain about the moment. We complain about what we don't have instead of thanking God for what we do have, instead of thanking God that we're not in the hospital, thanking God that we're able to dress ourselves and to feed ourselves and that we know where we are and that we didn't wake up in a nursing home, that we have family members that care about us. One of the saddest things I heard, I was in the hospital the other day, and we have this thing called interdisciplinary team meeting. And so what we do is they go through the hospital, they talk about the conditions of certain people and if they'll be leaving the hospital. Will they go here or go there? And though one of the gentlemen that they were talking about, they said he's in the nursing home and he doesn't have any family members to come and see about him. He's just alone. And what a sad, sad state of affairs that is. Being in the nursing home is a whole nother monster. But the fact that there was nobody to come and see about him, there were no family members to come and check on him. In essence, he was alone, and he lived his life, I'm sure, reaching out to people, communicating with people, loving people. And yet in this season of life, he found himself without anybody. And I thought that sad, and I just stopped and prayed for him. But Mom, the reason that we become frustrated with life is because in our season, we focus on where we are and where we feel we should be, instead of allowing God to be glorified where we currently are. We beat up ourselves because we talk about, I should be so much further along than this, and yet this is where I am. How is it that I find myself in this place, in this position right now, in this season of life, instead of saying, maybe I'm just where God wants me to be? The focus shouldn't be on the circumstance, but the ability for our omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient God to be able to use us in whatever circumstance that we're in. And so I want you to understand that there is purpose in your position. There is purpose in your positioning. Wherever you find yourself today, and I'm just about done, wherever you find yourself at today, I need you to understand that you are there for a divine purpose. You're not just there because you made some bad decisions, you made some bad choices, you got under the skin of some folk that got back at you, blah, blah, blah. Whatever it is you want to add, that you are there. But I need you to understand that you're there for a specific purpose. And my second point, your faith must always be bigger than the moment. Your faith must always be bigger than the moment. I think about Abraham. God told Abraham that his seed was going to be as numerous that he wouldn't be able to count it. And he told Abraham that all this land was going to be his. Abraham and Lot set out together, and then it got to a point where there was some issues between them, some dissension. And then Abraham told Lot, you pick the direction that you want to go, you go there, and then I'll go the other way. Lot picked the direction, he went towards Sodom. Some time passes, angels come to sit down and talk to Abraham about some things, and they're enlightening him. They get up the next morning and he asked the angels where they're going. They said they're going towards Sodom because they have to destroy some things there because of the evilness. Abraham immediately thought to himself, wait a minute, my man Lot is there. I can't let him get killed. I got to figure out how to get him out of there. And so he begins to have this conversation with God. Here's where your faith be bigger than the moment. He says, listen, God, if I can find 50 righteous men, will you stay your hand from Sodom? God says, if you could find 50 righteous men, I'll stay my hand. Abraham goes all the way down to one. God, if I can find one righteous man, will you stay your hand? God says, if you can find one, I'll stay my hand. God gives him the opportunity. He goes in and he gets Lot out and his family. And remember, as they were coming out, the part that everybody remembers is he told them to leave that place and not look back. Who looked back? Lot's wife looked back. The Bible declares that she was turned into a pillar of stone. She was, what's the word I'm looking for? Not calcified. I can't think of what the term is. But she became this solid figure. Abraham's faith was greater, so great that he was able to change the mind of God and get God to alter what he was going to do. Jesus in the garden, his faith was bigger than the moment. He didn't want to do what he knew needed to be done, but he spoke to a nevertheless, not my will, but your will, God, be done. And in our text, I want to talk about Esther for the last few minutes. Esther finds herself positioned. Now, she was in a great position. She was Jew, and they had been brought into captivity by the Babylonian Empire. Why? Because the children of Israel had this cycle that they constantly went through where God would deliver them, and then they would be disobedient, and God would have to bring them under subjection by a rival nation, and the nation would treat them bad, and then they would cry out to God, and then God would deliver them, and then they would go through that cycle over and over again. And I submit to you that many of us go through this same cycle over and over again. We say that we're going to do things differently this time, and yet we find ourselves on the next Sunday that we come together having not really moved very much. If I were to ask this question, I know what the response would be. And I know that just like the children of Israel, their intentions were good. They intended to do the right thing, but somewhere along the way, they were distracted. They got unfocused. Because if I were to say, who is still on par to finish reading the Bible in that 2-year time span? Have you fallen off? You've missed some days. It's not quite going the way that you want it to go. You don't have to answer that because I already know the answer. I know that it's in our mind. See, that's why I can understand and relate to Paul. Paul said, when I would do good, the good that I would do, that I don't do, that which is evil, that I do. There's this war going on in my members. It's hard for me to stay focused and keep doing the right thing. My heart is right, but somehow when I look back in this season of life, it seems as if things are not going the way I want to. I said I was going to read more. I said I was going to pray more. I said I was going to do this. I said I was going to lose weight. I said I was going to stop eating this. I said, and yet I look back and it seems as if I started out well, but those things are not going the way that I intended for them to go. I just want you to understand that you can't beat up on yourself. What you can only do is from where you are right now, understand that there is still purpose and you can still accomplish the task. You don't have to kill yourself. How about you just, I've become a person, I listen to a lot of podcasts now. So I'm pulling back on some things, music so much, and listening to podcasts because I'm enjoying learning from hearing other people talking, and I'm gleaning a lot from what they are saying. And so one of the things that they say in this particular podcast is how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? And that has certainly become one of my favorite sayings. We have to take life and our faith in bite-sized pieces, but you have to keep eating it consistently. And then you will find that over time you have consumed so much that there is more in you than you think that you have. Esther has been placed in this position of authority, and over all the other women in this harem, she was so beautiful that she was made queen. But even in spite of the fact that she was queen, she had not been called for by King Xerxes in 30 days. And she knew that if you went before him without his approval beforehand, and he didn't hold out his scepter, then you would be killed. And so she let Mordecai know this in response, again, to what was going on with the Jews, that they were all going to be killed. And I love how Mordecai says, listen, if you don't realize this, I need to let you in on a little secret. You one of us. Yeah, I get that you are there. I get that you've arrived. I get that you're in the kingdom. I get that you're the queen and that you have access to the best of everything. I get all of that. But lest you forget, queen, you are still a Jew. And Haman is going to kill all of us. So please don't get it twisted that thinking that your positioning negates the fact that you have purpose. As a matter of fact, he goes down later on to say, perhaps you haven't considered that your position that you are in was for such a time as this. In this particular season, God has placed you here so that you can be impactful for his purposes. And so I think this thing set in with her, and she says, okay, listen, here is what I want you to do. I want you to tell all of our people, tell the children of Israel that I want them to fast for 3 days. Okay. I want them to do that. And then I'm going to go before the king. And watch this. When you understand the importance of the season of life that you are in and you're walking with God, then there comes a boldness. Because the next thing she says, I'm going to go before the king. And if I perish, what'd she say, baby? I perish. She didn't care. Because when you are positioned where God needs you to be and you accept it as, when you stop beating up on yourself and you say, this is where I am, God can use me right where I am, then you become bold. You say, okay, I may not have a brand new fancy car. I may not have the best house. I may not have that 6-figure job. I may not have this, but I have something that God can use. There is something in me that God is able to make something great out of in this season. And so I'm willing to be bold. Matter of fact, I'm willing to step out on faith and trust God in spite of where I feel I should be. And can I submit to you that wherever you feel you should be, I'm just going to give you a reality check. You ain't there, baby. And since you ain't there, how about you just embrace where you are and do the best you can where you are with what you have. Let God use what you have where you are for his glory. Give God the glory for where you are positioned, for what you have. Give God what it is that you have that he can use. Your faith has to be bigger than the moment on the season that you find yourself in. But we allow ourselves to get distracted and to get down on ourselves. Well, I used to be able to do this, but I can't do that. Well, do something. Do something with what you have. The Bible declares if you have faith the size of a grain of a mustard seed, that you can move a mountain. But watch this. You can't move a mountain if you don't have faith the size of the grain of a mustard seed. In other words, you've got to have something, give God something to work with. If you're not willing to give God something to work with, what is it that you expect him to do? He cannot make something out of nothing. Here's what I love about athletes. Athletes that are preparing for something, they start working out when the season is over, preparing for the next season. An athlete will take a small amount of time off, but they realize that if they take too much time off, what's going to happen to Bria? There's going to be some atrophy of the muscles. And then when they go back and start working out, to Bria, we're having this conversation. She said, we were talking about, I was riding a bike. She said, don't let too much time pass before you get back on there. Otherwise, you're going to have to keep dealing with the soreness. Every morning when I get out of bed at 52, I'm realizing this not the same as 22. I get up out the bed and I have to move a little slowly until I get moving. As I'm coming down the stairs, I hear pop, 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 pop. That's my knees. Pop, 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 all the way down the stairs every morning. It is the routine. Once I'm moving, I'm fine. But because I've laid in the bed, watch this, for 8 hours, my body is saying, hey, fool, there's some stuff you got to pay for because you've been laying there. Now get up and get moving. Once I get moving, I realize that it's not as bad as I thought it was. You know, my knees have stopped popping and I'm not as stiff or as sore as I was because I've started moving. We've got to give God something to work with, even where we are. Here is what I mean. When I say your faith must be bigger than the moment, Don't allow yourself to only look at the moment, the pain of the moment, the disappointment of the moment, the stiffness of the moment, the way that things aren't working out for you in that moment. You've got to look, your faith has got to say, yes. Because see, here's what will happen. If I get out of the bed and I'm stiff and sore, I may say, well, I'm gonna get back in the bed because it ain't gonna get any better than this. In other words, I haven't allowed opportunity for my faith to grow. And because I have gone through this so many days, I know that once I get moving, I'll be fine. I've just got to get what? Moving. I've got to give God something to work with. I've got to allow my faith, confidence that in times past, once I've gotten active, this has always worked itself out. And if God did it then, he's going to do it now. That's why I'm able to be bold about things and have a confidence that things are going to work out. I don't worry about how things are going to work out because I believe and I'm confident that all things work together for good to them that love God and are called according to his purpose. And so it may not work out the way that I want it to, but I know that it's working out for my good. And so Esther was positioned because she was willing to take a move or step of faith out of what was comfortable to her. She wasn't willing to say, well, I'm going to take my chances and I'm going to stay because I don't have this history of how this thing is going to work out for me. And so she went to the king and she had a couple of things happen where she invited him back and back. The king kept saying, well, what is it you want me to do? Anything you want me to do. If you say you want half of this kingdom, I'll give it to you. And so the amazing thing, and please go back and read this. How amazing is it that the king loved her so that one, over everybody else, he made her queen. And he loved her so that he was willing to give away half of the kingdom to her. She didn't want that. She didn't get distracted by the stuff. She wanted her people. And so the person that ended up making this 70-something foot gallows that he was going to use to kill all of the Jews with ended up being the same thing that he was killed with. What you talking about, Cochran? The Bible declares that no weapon that is formed against you shall prosper. The weapon was formed, but it didn't prosper against the Jews. That same weapon was used to destroy the person who wanted to kill God's people. If you trust God and if your faith in God is bigger than whatever it is that you are facing, if it's bigger than whatever situation you find yourself in, if you are smart enough to recognize that even though I am in this season and it may not be all that I want it to be, I'm going to make the most of this season and just enjoy living my life to the glory of God and appreciate everything that God has provided me, then your faith will easily exceed the moment that you are in, and God will be able to use you for his glory. This is your season. Regardless of what your mind is telling you, I need you to realize that God can use you in this season of life. Everything may not be going the way that you want it to go, but I need you to understand that God can still use you, and God, watch this, will still use you for his glory. We oftentimes get discouraged and get frustrated by where we are, but you can never look at where you are because you are divinely positioned, strategically placed for the purposes of God. And whatever situation you find yourself in, talk to God about it. Don't talk to folk about it. Talk to God about it and allow God to be God in your life and to direct you. When you look around you, you may not see all that you want to see, but thank God that you are in the land of the living. And because you are in the land of the living, I told my wife today, she had said she was out yesterday running around all day, and she asked me, she said, after service, what are your plans for the day? I said, I'm going to take my bride out and put some food in her head. In other words, I'm going to take her out and go get her something to eat. Just for a few minutes, we're going to go out and we're going to put the windows down if the temperature ain't too bad, but we're just going to appreciate outside, being outside for a few minutes and go get something to eat, just enjoying being in each other's presence and come back. And she's got work to do. I've got some things I got to do, but always stop and take a moment to appreciate the people that are around you, to show love to the people that are around you, to reach out and strengthen relationships. It's the last thing I'm going to say, and then I'm going to go. I got word on Friday. If you live in Roanoke, then you may be familiar with this. There was this really, really bad fire that consumed 3 houses. I won't think it's southeast or southwest Roanoke the other day. And as a young lady, when I was here at Salem for about a year as the assistant director, there was a young lady named Tammy. She's one of the supervisors over there. And she was literally, her and this other lady, Lori, they're my right hands. I depended on them to really be frontline managers for the staff while I was able to get some other things done. There was a young man that was killed in that. He was burned in that fire and died. That was her grandson. I found that information out, and I have reached out to her just via text because I know it's a lot going on, but I really want to get in touch with her and pray with her. I said all that to say this, and I oftentimes say this, but I don't know that we really get it. I know that young man woke up that morning because that fire was like 8 o'clock in the morning. I know that he woke up that morning, and I know that he had plans. But they didn't come to fruition. His life ended that morning. You better learn to appreciate the season of life that you're in. You better learn to stop complaining and moaning about what you don't have. You better learn to just thank God and to get out here in this world. When I went to see my dad a couple of weeks ago, you know, we sat in the house and then we were outside, and I was just so appreciative of being outside and looking up at the huge trees and just saying, man, God is awesome. Out there cutting the grass yesterday, just appreciating the beauty of, you know, what God has provided. I'm not worthy of where I am. I've not been so good that I deserve what I have, but to God be the glory. And I tell everybody, it's not about me. Because listen, man, I've had a bad attitude. I've done people wrong. I've said the wrong things. I've been in the wrong places. It's just simply the grace of God. But I'm smart enough to know to go outside and smell the flowers and appreciate the trees and not complain about everything. When we was going to come on this morning, the one song I was going to sing is I Won't Complain. I want us to stop complaining and thank God. Every time you get ready to complain, just find something to thank God for instead of complaining. And I want my wife to correct me. If I'm complaining about something, I want her to say, hey, I won't complain. And I'm gonna do the same for her. I won't complain. If you're around me and you complain, I'm gonna say, but what can you give God glory for in this season of life? Get outside and appreciate it. Go sit on a stoop. Amen. I don't know if we still have stoops. I don't know what a stoop is. We call them steps now. But go sit on the steps and just appreciate being outside and give God glory. I thank God for all of you. This is a fundamental message that just pulls us back to recognizing what's important. And this young man, I believe he was 19 years old, 18 or 19. And life's gone. Life's gone. We have people on this call that are in their 60s and 50s, 60s, 70s. I think Tabria's the baby, 25. Kim, she getting there. We've got to just learn to appreciate life and thank God for the opportunity. We're trading our tomorrow for someday. And so we presented our bodies. What that means is we present our bodies as living sacrifices to God. for God to use us and to be glorified. Why? So that we can spend an eternity. Tabria, why? So that you can see Grandma and Grandpa Austin. Why? So that you can see your grandfather John. That's why. That's why we do it. Mom, so that you can see your mother again. Mommy, so that you can see your mother again. That's why, because God has been so good. And I look forward to that great getting up morning. But until then, I've got to appreciate what God has done and where God has placed me. I love all of you this morning. This is just a message that is meant to get you refocused on what matters, about the things. Quit beating yourself up. This is your chance to enjoy this season of life. I believe Miss Evelyn's on. Miss Evelyn is the